One of the lessons from the practical world is that sometimes counterfeit goods still circulate the market and pose a continuous threat to our business's reputation and to consumers. And this is not limited to the domestic market here in China. Those goods are packed and sent off to the rest of the world. Recently, all sorts of transportation are being used to bypass customs. For example, small size parcels or passenger luggage. These remain hard to pin down. However, as undetected these may be, the bigger shipments in classic containers are still the most damaging and impactful from the economical side. The question is, how does one trademark owner go about stopping this phenomenon? Well, for starters, if you have not yet obtained full registration of the mark in China, there is not much you can do for the moment. For everyone else whose trademark has been registered in China, there is hope. Chinese Customs, the General Administration for Customs, GAC in short, like many other customs authorities in the world, deal with in and out shipments at all times of the day. Scarcity of resources and vast borders don't allow for verification of each container. Therefore, customs agents spend part of their time randomly choosing shipments to inspect. During the rest of their time, and the majority of it, they focus on their database and on indications from IP owners directly to inspect a specific vessel. Occasionally, these inspections turn out to be successful and give rise to seizure of the goods, fines imposed, and often reveal the source of the counterfeiting manufacturer, who is attempting, in fact, to ship abroad. The process is quite straightforward and starting not too long ago, even free of charge. The database isn't connected to the China Trademark Office, so the only way to populate this database and give the officials a record of your intellectual property, the IP, and visual samples to spot infringing goods comes only from IP holders through a process called the IP Customs Recordal, or also known as the recordation of IP at Customs. Recordation will be granted within 30 days of the date of submission and lasts for the duration of a normally granted trademark, which is 10 years. The recordal of your IP with Customs serves to notify the GAC of the status of your intellectual property, providing them with details about whom to contact in case of suspected infringement, and including pictures or samples even of the product and its packaging. Regarding the recordal procedure, there are two steps. The first is to register an ID, and the second is to record the intellectual property. After filing the information of IP, filing the IP itself, the GAC will check the information and approve the recordal eventually. In addition, there are three types of intellectual property which can be recorded as usual: trademarks, patents, and also copyrights. While for the trademarks and the patents, these must be registered in China to benefit from this process, copyrights are protected at the moment of creation if the person or the company is part of a country signatory to the Berne Convention. And in any case, it is always best to file copyrights in China as well, to keep a record of ownership and certainty of date of creation. Having recorded your intellectual property as GAC, customs agents are better equipped for spotting suspicious transiting goods on their own initiative and based on the training and data received from the IP holder, or on the initiative of the IP holder himself. As a reminder, it may be useful to know that 96% of seizures were made on trademarks and on exports, on transport by ship. Let's suppose goods are seized. There is a process to notify the intellectual property owner to physically present himself on site and verify if the goods are infringing. If so, the intellectual property owner should pay a bond and wait for customs to issue a so-called determination within 30 days. The consequences can be a fine for the infringer and possibly a seizure and destruction of these seized goods. The bond is then returned and they all move on. Additional suggestions on the topic of intellectual property recordal with China Customs are to provide Customs with a contact person who is responsive and familiar with the topic. The second could be to maintain a close contact with Customs itself, the officials, in terms of updates on your products, providing samples, informing on significant changes on packaging and labeling. And For complex intellectual property, such as patents, even offer training sessions to the GAC officials. All of these work in favor of intellectual property infringement prevention. For mankind, the market and the trade fairs are by nature the oldest venue for showcasing, advertising, and for commercial dealings of goods and services. Companies display any sort of product, give live demonstrations even, and disperse hundreds of brochures and samples. Until intellectual property was not an issue as it is today, there was nothing wrong with that. In essence, it is still the best way to advertise and find business partners. However, trade fairs, of which Shanghai on average has more than 2 running at the same time almost every given day, are also places where people take other companies' intellectual property or display own products that are the exact copy of those belonging to other exhibitors, maybe just across the hall. As you can now anticipate, the risk for any intellectual property holder in venues like these is to inadvertently offer their own trademark to ambitious Chinese trademark squatters or manufacturers. With a few precautionary measures, the trade fair may just remain a pleasant experience for the exhibitor after all. Trade fairs are important for monitoring the potential source of the infringers. In China, even more so because they are usually closer to the source. And when the IP infringement is spotted at a trade fair, you should go about it with an agent or an investigator rather than by yourself. The first thing to do is to record the apparent or evident infringement with a Chinese notary and an IP official. These people are usually available at any trade fair in China that lasts more than 3 days. This intellectual property booth should be located sooner than later, and if possible, while the fair is being set up, just a few days before. The know before you go checklist, let's call it like that, should include the following. Are your IP rights in order and registered, abroad and in China? Do you have relevant documentation with you in copy, original, and at best, even notarized? With all this in place and in mind, the IP holder may either 1. Take action directly against the infringer on site through the help of the IP support in the booth at the trade fair, who in some cases can remove the infringing goods even, or close the stand for the rest of the duration of the trade fair. Or 2, after the trade fair, can work towards a raid or a seizure at the manufacturing location. Filing the mark in its Latin alphabet may not be enough in a country where English or your mother tongue, which is represented on a trademark, is not an official or commercial language. China, again, is an excellent example for that. Chinese customers, in fact, will relate to logos and other distinguishable shapes, but what about those trademarks which actually carry a meaning in its original language and are also not as easy to pronounce for the general Chinese public? What then? The owner will want to reflect that meaning. Think of a family name or an industry-related name for the Chinese general public or for a niche. Whether successful or not, the product or service will be identified or nicknamed even quickly and in Chinese and by Chinese consumers who notice there is no Chinese trademark yet or an official nickname or are not able to pronounce the original mark to begin with. That is when we have an opportunity to protect our mark in Chinese characters and the opportunity to appeal to its consumers with an intriguing choice of characters. Technically, this is a separate trademark filing, and it's best carried out around the same time the trademark in Latin alphabet is filed in China. Trademark owners can either 1. Literally translate the meaning of the original trademark into Chinese and hope that the choice of characters made is not ridiculous, misleading, or even ambiguous. The second choice is to file a Chinese character which sounds like the original trademark. Or 3. A blend of these, meaning find out a combination of sound and meaning, recalling the original trademark from home. It is definitely a marketing choice and process, so more than a law firm, one should sit with naming companies and specialists possibly even bilingual, up to date with the trends and the lingo of and in the specific target market. Thank you for viewing this episode of Dezan Shira's VidCast. For further information and to stay updated on the latest news and insights on doing business in Asia, please visit our website at www.dezshira.com.